June 30th, 1995. A voice built like a cathedral goes silent before showtime. The note she leaves behind is short. The echo is not. She was the eldest of 7 from Clair Village. More books than records. More quiet than applause. Training a contralto that could bend steel into silk. One song
on the
turns
R&B
the room.
charts.
Suddenly the clubs get smaller. The stakes get larger, and labels begin to circle. Enter Clive Davis, Barry Manilow, Reggie Lucas, and James Mtume. You Know How to Love Me lights the dance floor, but the boardroom wants a box she will not fit. Sophisticated Ladies crowns her with a Tony nomination. Discipline wrestles with nightlife. Image wrestles with expectation. She sings grown folk truth, living all alone. And then, a decade in, her first R&B #1, Don't Want to Change the World. Behind the ovations, fear and fight, control and commerce, love and loss, an artist determined not to be packaged, and a business determined to try. This is not just a rise and fall, it's the anatomy of a voice, and the cost of refusing the wrong kind of success. If you think you know how this ends, listen again. The story is still singing. On a humid afternoon in New York, June 30th, 1995, the music world lost a singular contralto. Phyllis Linda Hyman, 45 years old, 6 days shy of her 46th birthday. Official reports called it an overdose of sleeping pills. But her story, its bruises and its brilliance, had been writing itself for decades. Born July 6, 1949, in Philadelphia and raised in Pittsburgh's Clair Village, Hyman grew up the eldest of 7 in a home where television and books were more constant than records. The projects, the row houses, the busy kitchens. Out of that landscape came a voice that could bend torch song velvet around jazz steel. She was statuesque, well over 6 feet, with stage presence that could silence a nightclub. Yet she spoke openly about stage fright. In school choirs, she learned breath and blend, then pushed into local groups like Sounds of Ebony, edging toward the microphone even as nerves pulled her back. Pittsburgh choir director and mentors helped shape her technique and polish her image. Teeth capped, gowns chosen, poise rehearsed, prepping a voice meant for bigger rooms. A brief scholarship stint at Robert Morris was as much about discipline as it was about music. Life pulled harder than campus ever could. Secretarial day jobs paid bills. Club gigs fed a different hunger. She sang standards, read audiences, learned that ballads could command the same power as up-tempo showpieces if the phrasing told the truth. Miami became her crucible. In the early 70s, she rotated through bands, the New Directions, All the People, before building the PH Factor, a working outfit that could move from Latin and funk to smoky supper club sets. Cruise ship contracts taught her endurance and stagecraft. On one of those boats, she met Larry Alexander, who would become her partner and, eventually, her manager. The chemistry was obvious, so were the complications that come when love and business share the same ledger. Desert Moon Records came calling. Executive Sid Mauer with producer George Kerr, nudging Hyman toward radio-friendly disco at a moment when she preferred timeless jazz R&B. She could execute anything producers asked, but the early cuts felt over-decorated. Strings where silence might have said more. A promising single, Baby, I'm Gonna Love You, flickered at R&B radio yet didn't define her lane. December 1975 brought New York a long club residency and a quiet audience member named Norman Connors. The drummer-arranger heard a voice that could live inside cosmic jazz balladry. And soon Hyman's alto threaded through his 1976 LP, You Are My Starship, on duet moments. We Both Need Each Other, and on a sumptuous cover of Betcha by Golly, Wow. The exposure gave her a national calling card, star poise without gimmickry. Connors helped steer Hyman to Buddah Records in 1977, a label with deep soul credentials and a promise of creative control. Her self-titled Buddah debut yielded a minor R&B hit, Loving You, Loosing You, and critical notice for the instrument itself. The way she could suspend a note until time seemed to lean toward her. Yet Buddha's resources were fading. The broader machine she needed was about to change hands. In 1978, Arista acquired Buddha's catalog and priorities, placing Hyman within Clive Davis's orbit. Control and commerce were about to enter their long negotiation. The stage was set for a thrilling ascent, and a tug-of-war that would mark the rest of her career. Arista's first step was to reframe the product. Clive Davis assigned Barry Manilow to cut the title track to Somewhere in My Lifetime, released January 1979. The album blended earlier Buddah material with sleek Arista updates, pairing Hyman's jazz instincts with pop architecture. It reached number 15 on the R&B albums chart and number 70 pop. The title single became her biggest R&B hit to date at number 12. 9 months later, Arista doubled down. Hyman entered the studio with Reggie Lucas and James Mtume, fresh from shaping contemporary soul for artists like Stephanie Mills, to record You Know How to Love Me. The title track became a club essential and a Quiet Storm standard, peaking at number 12 R&B and lighting up dance floors well beyond its chart print. The album hit number 10 on the R&B albums tally, her strongest long player of the era. But marketing couldn't find the right elevator pitch. She wasn't simply jazz, nor strictly R&B, and she resisted a full pop makeover. Radio formats in the disco backlash years were narrowing their gates. Hyman wanted repertoire that honored Dinah Washington and Nancy Wilson as much as FM playlists. The label wanted clear lanes and bigger hooks. The mismatches bred tension. What sells versus what fits a life. Industry politics entered the personal. As the Arista roster grew, with Clive scouting versatile female vocalists across pop and R&B, Hyman watched resources tilt toward projects that were easier to position. Colleagues recall her fear of being pushed into a template. Hyman herself admitted, in press of the period, to a fear of getting too big, the kind that can make an artist tap the brakes just as the road opens. Press recollections summarized in later biographies. The work never faltered. On stage, she was dazzling. In studios, she was meticulous about phrasing, dynamics, and arrangement. But the climb became steeper as the early 80s arrived. Program directors consolidating, crossover calculus tightening, budgets following the safest bets. Between the artist who prized control and the executive who prized outcomes, an invisible ledger started to run red. Between the artist who prized control and the executive who prized outcomes, an invisible ledger started to run red. On screen, Arista Records, 1979, You Know How to Love Me. Next, a spotlight shift, out of the studio and onto Broadway, would recrown the voice and complicate everything it touched. You're watching World Stories and Documentary, home for untold music histories, label chess games, and the artists who fought for their sound. If this deep dive on Phyllis Hyman resonates, subscribe now and queue up our related features on Quiet Storm icons, Clive Davis's power era, and Broadway crossovers who changed the charts. Binge the stories behind the songs you love. In October 1980, rehearsals began for Sophisticated Ladies, the Duke Ellington revue that would introduce Hyman to Broadway's bright marquees. When the show opened in March 1981, critics praised her regal carriage, deep timbre, and command of Ellington's Velvet. She earned a Tony Award nomination for Best Featured Actress in a Musical and won a Theatre World Award, proof she could hold a stage measured in thousands of seats. Theater spotlighted her strengths, poise, phrasing, the way she could unspool a line until the room leaned in, but it also exposed the strain. The grind of 8-show weeks, the disciplined call times, and nightlife's gravitational pull made for a delicate balance. Press noted brilliance wrapped in unpredictability. Friends saw loneliness flicker behind standing ovations. Arista moved to capitalize. Can't We Fall in Love Again, 1981, produced by Norman Connors, returned Hyman to radio with the title duet climbing to number 9 on the R&B singles chart and the album peaking at number 11 on R&B albums. It was her first top 10 R&B single, a vindication for her crossover between jazz sophistication and contemporary soul. Image narratives multiplied. Magazine covers framed her as a romantic in search of matching devotion. Men's magazine photo spreads complicated brand calculations. In a business that policed black women's images, too statuesque, too serious, too sensual, she was asked to be everything at once and penalized whichever way she turned. The endorsements that come with mainstream visibility proved fragile when identity didn't fit a preset mold. Contemporaneous coverage and later biographies recount the fallout. 1983's Goddess of Love underperformed, solid singing, but a marketplace drifting elsewhere. Arista's center of gravity shifted, and Clive Davis, ever the strategist, poured attention into a new signing from New Jersey with Cathedral, pure pop tone and church in the bones. Whitney Houston, who joined the label in April 1983 and would become a franchise unto herself. For Hyman, this was both understandable triage and a quiet heartbreak. She left Arista with debts common to artists whose advances outpaced recoupment. The ledger had numbers, the story had wounds. And even as doors closed in one direction, another audition beckoned that could have rewritten the next act entirely. Hollywood called. Steven Spielberg's adaptation of The Color Purple, 1985, needed a Shug Avery, sensual, dangerous, magnetic. Hyman reportedly impressed early casting but stumbled in front of the director. The role went elsewhere. It wasn't the first time Control, so fiercely guarded, clashed with a system that required surrender. Accounts differ. Later retellings note nerves and missteps. Philadelphia International Records, Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff's storied label, offered a reset with Living All Alone, 1986. The album brought Hyman back to core strengths: lush orchestration, adult soul narratives, and ballads that let her pull listeners through grief and longing. The title track reached number 12 R&B. Old Friend became a signature, peaking at number 14 R&B. She toured, often earning five-figure, nights that steadied the finances. Film arrived too. In 1988, Spike Lee's School Days included Hyman in its tapestry of HBCU culture, another cultural bookmark for a singer whose influence extended beyond radio spins. Recovery attempts threaded the late 80s and early 90s. Rehab stints, renewed routines, periods of clarity. Then, a late career peak. Prime of My Life, 1991. Don't Want to Change the World hit number 1 on the R&B singles chart, her only chart topper, and Living in Confusion returned her to the R&B top 10. For a moment, the radio embraced the precise phrasing and grown folks storytelling she'd carried since Pittsburgh. Television moments didn't always go as planned. Tributes are tall stages, even for giants. Grief sharpened the edges. The passing of her grandmother and, soon after, her mother, deepened a loneliness she often wrote about. Friends and later biographers cite periods of depression and a reported bipolar diagnosis. The stigma around mental health, especially for Black women artists, made treatment both necessary and fraught. Summarized in Jason A. Michael's Strength of a Woman and Contemporaneous Reporting. Theater returned in the mid-90s with the musical Blues Bar, but lines wouldn't stick and injuries interrupted runs. Programs list Hyman in the cast as Etta Mae Pickens, evidence of the work even when the work resisted. The stage that had crowned her with Ellington now demanded a steadiness her life could not consistently supply. Relationships, some public, some private, came and went. Companionship didn't cure the ache. The paradox held, adored in rooms of thousands, alone in rooms of one. The next, final turn would come swiftly. This is World Stories and Documentary. If you value careful, compassionate storytelling about artists like Phyllis Hyman, subscribe and keep watching. Next up, our deep dives on Anita Baker's Quiet Storm Revolution, the Gamble and Huff sound at Philadelphia International, and the Broadway to Billboard pipeline that shaped the 80s. The Apollo was on the calendar for the night of June 30th, 1995. Instead, late afternoon brought the news. Phyllis Hyman had died in her New York apartment.
It hit the music world today. R&B singer Phyllis Hyman was found dead in her apartment this afternoon.
Police and press reported a suicide. Close at her hand was a note that read, "I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you." The sentence is simple. The pain behind it was not. In the years since, the reevaluation has been generous and overdue. Listen closely to the technique, the way she placed consonants at the ends of long phrases. Her command of head tone versus chest tone, the micro-hesitations she used to make lyrics ring like lived advice. She didn't so much write arrangements as define how they breathed. Industry historians now frame her career as a case study in lanes and labels. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, radio formats hardened, and the marketing of Black women vocalists often demanded boxes: pop polish, disco gloss, or jazz seriousness. Hyman challenged those categories. She wanted Dinah's bite, Sarah's elegance, and modern R&B muscle, an honest fusion that was a few years early for the market built later by adult R&B and quiet storm programmers. Consider the data points. Norman Connors' You Are My Starship era announced her, 1976. Buddah established her palette, 1977-78. Arista delivered a canon entry with You Know How to Love Me, 1979, Lucas Mtume. Broadway conferred Prestige, 1981 Tony nomination, Theatre World Award. Philadelphia International restored the cathedral reverb around her voice with Living All Alone, 1986. Prime of My Life crowned the comeback with an R&B number 1 in 1991. The trajectory is coherent, even if the headlines weren't. The influence is audible in singers who prize diction as a dramatic instrument, in artists who insist ballads can feel dangerous, in performers who treat stage posture as part of the song. You can hear her in the meticulous balladry of later R&B stylists, and in the vocal drama of modern jazz soul crossovers who study phrasing like archaeology. Control versus commerce, fear of failure versus fear of success. Hyman's life carries those twin tensions. She wanted the right songs, the right producers, the right narrative, not to sand herself into an all-format star. The cost was measurable, budgets reallocated, campaigns delayed, label patience tested. The reward is permanent. Records that still sound expensive to the ear and honest to the heart. For viewers, the entry points are clear. Start with the phosphorescent glide of You Know How to Love Me, 1979. The bruised cathedral of Living All Alone, 1986. And the triumphant swing of Don't Want to Change the World, 1991. Then go backward to the Buddah debut to hear the raw materials, and forward to live recordings to feel the scale of the instrument and air. The last line is hers, but the echo is ours. We remember Phyllis Hyman not only for how she left, but for what she gave us. A voice that made luxury feel like confession and confession feel like strength. For the next chapter in this story universe, watch our features on Anita Baker's Rapture era, the rise of Whitney Houston at Arista, and the making of Quiet Storm Radio. 3 threads that help explain both the winds Hyman sang into and the weather she helped change.